Hey, this is Patrick from Frontly. Today I'm going to give a full app build tutorial, and the tutorial is going to be creating a movie idea generator, which is a really fun app to create, and it uses OpenAI to generate ideas for a movie, and that's going to be based, in this case, on just a plot summary typed in by the user. Now, when watching this, keep in mind everything is very customizable, and you can basically decide what parts of the data you want the AI to generate and what parts your users should be entering. And you could even create sort of multi-step flows. And so just, keep in mind that it's very customizable, but I'm going to go through this specific example. So all I've done so far is I've created a fresh, empty app, and I've created this simple spreadsheet. I have a few columns: name, plot summary, protagonist, antagonist, rising action, climax, and resolution. So these are just some of the standard aspects to a movie. I'm not covering them all, obviously, but you can go in detail in your own, and you may as well follow along if you have time just to see how this goes. This should be about 30 minutes or less. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my user type in the plot summary in a form field, and then everything else is going to be generated, including the name of the movie. Now, you can see I've pre-populated this with one example, which is the Lion King. And so I'm going to just take this spreadsheet ID, and I'm going to go into my app, and I'm going to import the spreadsheet, and I'm going to get started. All right, so I'm going to go create a new page, and I'm going to call this movie generator. Now, all I need is a form. So I'll select my spreadsheet, and I'm going to set the form to create mode. So in create mode, all the form will do by default is just create a record in a Google Sheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable all of the fields except for plot summary. So although we have those fields by default, I just want my user to type the plot into this box. And to make it even nicer, since it's just one field, I'm going to click on that field. I'm going to change the input to a text area field. And so that allows long text input. And I'm going to change the minimum height to 200 pixels. So you can see it feels more like a field that would be naturally suited for entering a plot summary. I'm going to still keep it pretty brief, but it's nice to have that format. And if I want, I can rename this. So let's say generate a movie idea based on a plot summary. And if I go to the more section, I can make a few changes. I'm going to change the submit button text to generate movie. And in this case, I'm going to disable the default submit action. So the reason is I don't want the form to just create a row with my plot summary in it. What I want to do is I want to trigger a custom submit action, and the first step is going to be an OpenAI action. So I'm going to select that now. And if we wanted to do a really simple example, what we could do is we can just say generate the plot of a movie based on the following summary. So I'm going to type in form.plot summary, and I'm using this variable syntax, which is 2 brackets on either side, the variable name, and then the field name. So remember, plot summary, that's taken right from my spreadsheet here. I could have copied and pasted it. Make sure that you use the exact values. So we have this response type field now for the OpenAI request. By default, it's set to text. So for the first example, let's just leave it at that, and let's see what happens. All we're doing is we're asking the AI to take our plot summary and then generate the plot of a movie. So maybe that's pretty simplistic. I'm just going to hit save. And I guess what we're going to do for this simple example is I'm going to create one more step after the OpenAI request, and I'm going to update the local state. So if you haven't used the local state, all it is essentially creating your own custom variables where you can store data and then you can display them throughout the app and use them in actions. So it's very versatile. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable called plot. And the value is going to be using this variable injector here. I'm going to select the previous step. I'm going to select the step 1, which is my first step, the OpenAI request. And the field, when you're just using the text option, it's response. That's the name of the plain text response from the OpenAI action. So you can see here we've injected this variable action steps.1.response. Now, that's all I need to do here. And in order to display that local state variable that I just created, I can click here. So I created the text block, and I'm going to click local state, and then it's asking me for the field, which I named plot. So maybe I'll just make this text a bit bigger. And now if I hit save and preview, this should work, but it will be pretty simple. I haven't really given the AI much direction in terms of how to generate this plot. It's just kind of getting basic info. So let's try something like a futuristic society where robots have taken over. That's all I'm going to say. Really, really simple. Let's click generate movie and we'll see what the AI comes up with. So there we go. A group of rebels must band together to fight against the tyrannical machines. Yeah, pretty cool. But it's just a big lump of text. Now, in most cases, you're going to want something a little bit more granular so you can feed it into maybe different columns in your spreadsheet. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. So I'm going to close this window, and we're actually going to get, we're going to go into the form and we're going to make some changes. So in my submit action, the OpenAI request. So I'm going to keep the same information here. Maybe instead of generate the plot, I'm going to say generate movie information, or I'll say generate a movie idea based on the following summary. So probably that doesn't really matter, but I just don't want it to think it's only generating one field. And then I'm going to change the response type to object. So this is new, and this is very exciting. Instead of just getting one piece of text back, you can define a bunch of field names, or in this case, we call it a key, but it's a key and a description. So for example, I'm going to create one field for each of my spreadsheet fields. So in this case, I want there to be name, I want there to be a protagonist, antagonist, rising action, climax, and resolution. Now, the description is something that I'm going to have to type in plain text, so I'll just do that quickly right now. I won't take too much time. You can spend as much time as you want on yours. So the name is just going to be the name of the movie. So this is telling the AI what these fields mean so that it can understand the context, and it'll do a way better job of actually responding in the right way. So fortunately, AI is pretty smart, and it probably would know exactly what I want based on these names, but giving it a description just tunes it a little bit better. So protagonist will be, the hero of the story. Antagonist will be the enemy of the hero, or I'll just leave it at that. Don't judge my literary terminology here. So rising action is going to be the event that triggers all the exciting stuff to start happening. The climax will be the peak of the movie where the main event happens. And then the resolution is when things are, or how things are resolved and start winding down. So that's great. So just with this alone, instead of getting a blob of text, we're going to get, it's called an object. And so if you're not familiar with programming, don't worry about it. An object is just basically a container that can hold a bunch of fields. And so this is pretty much what it looks like. It's just a bunch of field names, and then there'll be, instead of the description, it'll actually be the results from the AI. And I will leave it at that for now. And then with the local state, I'm actually not going to use this anymore. This was good for my example when I just wanted to display one text response, but I think I'm going to do something a little bit more sophisticated. So I'm going to delete my text, and now what I'm going to do, first I'm going to hit save because I don't want to lose that setup, and I'm going to create a new page which is called movie details. So on this page, all I'm going to do is I'm going to display the details that are generated by the AI for one specific movie. So I'm going to add an info list, which is just a list of labels and values that's automatically formatted for me, so I don't really have to worry about it. And the one field that you do need to figure out what to enter for the info list is this row ID. So if you type in an actual ID from your sheet, in my case like ID1, you'll see it's just going to show the first row from the sheet. This is essentially what it's going to look like, but we don't want a static value like this. We want this to be dynamic. And so the way you can do that is using the URL parameters. Now, I will explain this and I will show you exactly how it works, so don't worry if that word scares you. So I'm going to select the insert variable URL parameters, and I'm going to come up with a field name that I want to use, which contains the ID of the record that we're going to display on this page. So I'm just going to call it ID. Surprisingly, it's very simple. So you can see the variable was injected here, params, which is the shortcut for the URL parameters. So params.id. Now on this page, that is all I need to do. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to jump back to the movie generator page. So now that we've set up our movie details page, we can go back to our action in the form, and we can add another follow-up step to the OpenAI request. So instead of setting it to the local state like we did in the first example, we're going to do two things. One, we're going to create a new row in the Google Sheet with the response. And so I'm going to set the success notification text to movie generated, and then I have to fill in these fields. So this might take a few seconds, but it's definitely worth the payoff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the first one. I'm going to select previous step, which accesses the response from the OpenAI action. Now I'm going to click step 1, and if I was using the text response option that we tried initially, the value is response. But now that I've created an object and I've created all of these named fields, instead of response, I actually just type the name of my field. So remember, I created name and protagonist and antagonist and all that. So I'm going to click insert, and we've injected this variable here into the name. So when we create our sheet, this value will be entered into the name field. Now, instead of doing that repeatedly through this injector, what I can do is I can copy and paste this, and then I can just update it a little bit. So instead of name, it'll be protagonist. This will be antagonist. Rising action, climax, and resolution. So the plot summary, I didn't use the action steps variable here because the plot summary isn't coming back from the AI. The plot summary is the one field that we're actually typing in the form. So I can actually still use the form.plot summary variable, and that will ensure that even though the form data and the action steps are coming from different places, they're all injected into my new row. So this is going to be awesome, and that's almost all I have to do. This will create the information and it will save it to a sheet. Now, the interesting part is that we're going to navigate to the movie details page. And so I'm going to select that here with my navigate to page step. Now, we talked about URL parameters. So this is the easy way to do this. So we can add the parameter right here. We only need one, and I decided to call it ID. Now, the value is important. So this is where we're going to click on this injector again. We're going to go previous step, but this time, instead of step 1, which is the OpenAI request, we're going to go step 2, which is the Google Sheet action. So when you do a Google Sheet create row, the response is actually just an object that contains all of the fields from that new row. And in this case, the only one that we actually care about is the ID, which in our sheet is called Frontly ID. So I'm going to enter Frontly ID here. That's the unique identifier generated by Frontly for all of the rows in your sheet, just to make sure they can be, we can find which row is which. So I'm going to click Insert, and you can see we've injected this action steps.to.frontly ID. So after all that work, we're going to type something into the plot summary field. It's going to run this action. It's going to get the AI responses. It's going to add them in the Google Sheet, and then we're going to navigate to the other page, and that page is going to, using the URL parameters, it's going to load that new row in real time from the sheet. So I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to hit preview, and we're going to try this, and hopefully it works. So let's try another plot summary, something that maybe we'll be familiar with. So let's see. Okay, there's a movie called Elysium, which is this sci-fi movie where basically it's in the future where the rich live on a space station above Earth in luxury, and the poor live in rough conditions on Earth. So that's all I'm going to type in. I want the AI to do the hard work of coming up with my movie idea and all the characters and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to click Generate Movie. Now, watch when I do this. You're going to see we're going to get navigated to this other page. And all right, so you can see here that the URL is movie-details like I entered, but then there's $ID equals 2. So what that does is that is the URL parameter. So that is the ID value stored in the URL, and we're able to access that using the params.id variable, and that is how this info list block is able to populate based on that information. So now we're seeing the AI generated information, and let's check it out. So I typed in the plot summary, and so let's see. The protagonist, Luna. Antagonist, Maxwell. Rising action. Luna, a resourceful young woman from Earth, sneaks onto the space station to seek a better life for her people. All right, that's pretty much, that's pretty much the story of Elysium, actually. So it did a great job. It probably knows that I'm talking about this movie. Anyway, so the fun part will be to really use this to come up with new ideas. And this is just one example. You can take this and you can do whatever you want with it. You can take those values, you can put them into the local state, you can add them to your Google Sheet rows, and if you want, what you can do is you can create another page where the information gets expanded on. So let's say maybe I want the AI to generate a little more information. So why don't we go to the movie details and let's try one thing. So I'm going to add a button, and it's going to say, let's see, write, I mean, this is getting kind of silly, but write a high level plot, or, generate sequel. So what this is going to do is I'm going to have a text block down here. It's going to say local state dot sequel. Wow, I keep not spelling this correctly. All right, and now I'll make that a little bigger. So this is just a text block right now. This is just a button. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have the AI take in some of this information, and we're going to just have it generate an idea for a sequel to this film that we've generated. So generate a summary for a sequel film for the following film. Now I can expand this a little bit to make my life easier. So I'm just going to pass in some basic information. So there's going to be name, and it's going to be summary. I think that's pretty much it. So Now, in this case, because I'm already on this page and I have my block, I'll be able to access the information from that block, and it's going to be like this. So it's going to be block.1, which is the ID of this block. Now, I'll show you how to find that. But in this case, because we're entering it into this OpenAI prompt, we don't have the injector window here because it's this big text field. So block.1.name, and I'll just copy and paste that. Block.1.plot summary. And you know what? I'll add the climax too, just so that it has a little more information. Ideally, I would go through and I would add all the fields, but I'm just not gonna bother right now to save time. So, all right, so we're gonna send it the name of the movie, the plot summary, and the climax, and we're gonna hope that the AI will generate a nice. I'm just gonna leave it in plain text, but it's gonna generate the idea for a sequel. So the next step will be to update the local state, and this is going to be sequel because that's what I named the variable. And as usual, I'm going to go previous step, step 1, response, because I've chosen this text option. So that's going to, while we're looking at this page, it's going to allow us to click this button and generate the idea for a sequel here. And just to show you how to figure out this block variable ID. So this is when you have something like a form or an info list or something like that that's displaying one record. This doesn't work for tables and grids and stuff because they display lots of records. But if you have an info list, you can access data from that, basically you can access this data using the block variable. So if you click on the injector, you can see block data. And then if you select the movie ideas block and you type in a field, name, you can insert that variable. Now, this is how you find the block ID. The ID number 1 is something that's behind the scenes in the Frontly system, but if you're trying to use it somewhere that doesn't have this injector, you can just create a text block, use this injector, and then copy and paste it. So I've already done that manually, so I don't need this. And so I'm gonna hit save, and hopefully this works. So I'm gonna go back to my generator. I'm gonna just refresh the page. And so we have our information here, and I'm going to click Generate Sequel. There we go. In the sequel to Stranded, tensions escalate. Yeah, anyway, it's just cool how you can have the AI generate some information, you can save it in a sheet, and then if you want, you can have your team be able to click buttons to generate expansions on that data or revise the data. You could say, you could have a button that says generate a better climax, and you could just have it randomly generate it until you're happy and then ready to move on. So I hope that this gives you some exciting ideas about how to use our AI system and how to build some interesting apps. Thanks for watching.